What's up? Welcome to another episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm your host, Jazz Monet, and hopefully you can hear me. Um, Long story short, I am still having trouble with internet where I am. I haven't moved yet. I thought I would have moved by now, but I had to realign some things in terms of timeline. As most of y'all know, I've still been working while trying to pack, while trying to move. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, gotta adjust this timeline a little bit. So unfortunately, my internet connection is still a little bit unstable. So if you can hear me, let me know in the comments that you can hear me, so I know at least there's audio. There are some things that kind of like last time that I want to share with you guys that I don't know if I'll be able to share because my laptop is just being weird. The internet is actually connected this time, but for whatever reason, the picture I'm getting here doesn't match the picture I'm getting here. And when I try to share something, I don't see it here, which makes me think that if I try to, like, for example, pull up these documents for you guys, y'all won't be able to see them. I'm gonna test it real quick now that I'm actually live. But okay, Cornell says he can hear me clearly. That's good. Okay, so y'all can hear me. So if nothing else, I can relay the information verbally. I can read it to you. But I do like to show y'all these documents because I like. It's not that I think y'all think I'm making anything up, but just like I want y'all to see what I'm seeing. Like I want y'all to be able to read along. I want y'all to be able to hear everything. And yeah, it's still not coming up. I don't know what is going on with my internet. And like I said, when I talked to them, it seemed so complicated. I was like, I will just figure this out when I move. So, next week, next week, my shows will go much better. We'll have intros again. I'll be able to share documents with you again. And if you follow me on Twitter, then one of the things that you already know is this won't be the last time that we talk about this situation with Dak Prescott. But I'm pretty much going to jump right into it. I know there's a lot to talk about in the sports world. There was an amazing game between the Indiana Fever and the Chicago Sky recently that says a lot about where the coverage of the WNBA is going. That's something that I wanted to talk about. What else? The NBA draft was happening, and it was like the most underwhelming draft I think I've ever witnessed in my lifetime. That's for sure. So there's some guys from France who were drafted, number one and number two, who I personally am not familiar with. I'll be honest, I love sports, just like the name of my show says, but I don't pay attention to international ball like that. So I know enough to know that basketball in France and in Spain is on the rise. I don't know enough to know who these guys are or what to expect from them. So I will be learning just like you guys. And honestly, and I'm gonna say this real quick, and then we're gonna get into the DAC stuff. When I heard that they were covering the NBA draft for 2 days this year, which they never do. It's normally like the first day, and then everything else you find out like through headlines and whatnot. So when I heard that they were covering it for 2 days, my first thought was like, okay, they're doing 2 days of coverage to make sure that they can cover wherever Bronny James gets drafted to. That must be it. Because a lot of people were kind of like, yeah, he's not going on the first day. And I don't think he did. I kind of tuned out. So if he did and I missed it, that is my bad. I did kind of tune out, but I do think that that's a big reason because they're like, yeah, the kid's not exactly the best guy in the draft, but he's like the only name that a lot of people know. Like, unless someone was drafted who you follow, like their college career, or who you're like a fan of the school that they went to, a lot of these guys, a lot of fans, a lot of NBA fans have no idea who they are, no clue what to expect. So it's an interesting time for the NBA. There seems to be like a lack of star power coming in. But anyway, that being said, let's talk about this Dak Prescott situation. Let's clear up some things. And I realize I have to get up a lot earlier than I thought I was going to have to get up. So we're going to talk about that. And then, I'll answer your questions and I'll shut it down. So, um, I've actually been waiting for this day for a while. The fact that there was a hearing today was announced a while ago. And I actually, like, in the midst of everything that I'm doing, I actually kind of forgot that it was today. And then I was checking on everything yesterday, and I was like, oh, the hearing is tomorrow. So, like, I was like looking at all the documents I had missed. And, I woke up this morning and I was trying to see what was filed and what wasn't filed. And some interesting things did happen between yesterday and today that I do think had a bearing on the news that we got today. So, first things first, and let me go ahead and pull up my notes on my phone since I can't get them on my laptop. Like I said, I want to make sure that I'm at least accurate with you guys because believe it or not, some of the news outlets that have been reporting on this are not exactly what I would call accurate. Um, so you're probably seeing headlines that say something like, I think I saw one that said Dak Prescott has been cleared of all charges. So let me correct that. This particular lawsuit, he's not necessarily being charged with anything in the sense that a lot of people might think of it. Like there's no guilty or innocent verdict that's going to come out of this situation for Dak Prescott because of where we are. So a little bit of a timeline. And I wrote down some dates here just to make sure that I told you guys the right thing. So, the last episode I did about this extortion lawsuit, it was either the day of or shortly after all the headlines started coming out saying that the Dallas police weren't going to investigate because they couldn't find any evidence to support the claims of Victoria Shores. And so that was a really interesting day because a lot of people took the news that they couldn't find any evidence and weren't going to investigate as a sign that everything was over. And I, on that particular episode, pointed out to everyone, hey, the stuff happening in Dallas County is over, but there's a whole nother case in Collin County. So to rewind a little bit for anybody who might just be joining us or for anybody who might have forgotten, since it's been a little while since we discussed this, um, it was March 11th that Dak Prescott filed his extortion lawsuit. So he got the news of the request for damages from Victoria Shores sometime in, I think it was February when he received that documentation, when he and his representation received that documentation, right? So they got that news. And March was when they submitted the paperwork filing a lawsuit that you could consider a lawsuit for extortion or a lawsuit for damages due to extortion. Either way, he was like, yo, I didn't do what this woman is saying I'm doing. She's defaming my character. She's slandering my name and she's trying to get me for $100 million. And this is not okay. As a matter of fact, it's illegal. So, civil action, right? So that's what happened on March 11th. Now, the letter that was sent to Dak Prescott um, and or his attorney, I don't know if it was initially sent to Dak Prescott and his attorney or if it was sent to him and then he hired an attorney. But either way, the letter that was originally sent, the demand letter, was the letter from Victoria Shores, who's the accuser, and her attorneys, who I'm still not sure how to pronounce their last name. So we're going to say Zehaie. It's spelled Zehaie. So Zehaie. So there's Yoel and there's Bethel Zehaie, right? And so they submitted this demand letter basically saying, hey, our client went to a social event with you. XYZ happened that amounted to sexual assault. And so, because of everything that she's gone through in life ever since that moment, we are demanding damages in the amount of $100 million. And if you don't give us $100 million, we are going to take legal action. And so that was when Dak and his representation were like, this is extortion, so civil action, right? And so it was a few days after that that Victoria Shores and her attorneys did indeed take legal action, which is kind of weird, right? Because it's like now you're trying to say, oh no, we didn't extort him. We didn't say pay us or we're going to take legal action. We just took legal action when he refused to pay us. Um, so do with that information what you will. Anyway, all that happened in March. Fast forward, there have been a few motions filed since then. Hey Jay, how's it going? And sorry, I gotta lean in. Big Flock 91. Uh, I think you're new, but you said now pay my mans and locked up the next 5 years. Uh, we're gonna get to what might happen to her a little bit later. There's a little bit of foreshadowing there. So anyway, all that happened in March, right? So fast forward, and this is where we start connecting the dots to what happened today. On April 16th, Victoria Shores submitted a counterclaim. So a counterclaim is basically like, if we want to boil it down to something that might happen in our regular lives, right? Let's say I go out to dinner with a friend, and on the way to the dinner with this friend, I'm talking about how much I love French fries. And she's like, yeah, you should order some. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then we get to the table and she orders for both of us, but she only orders one thing of fries, right? And so the fries come to the table, and I grab some fries because she knows I want some fries. And she's like, hey, you're not supposed to be eating my fries. These are my fries. I told you to order fries, right? And so my counterclaim against that might be, no, you put me under the impression that you were going to order for both of us. You knew I wanted fries, so you should have ordered me fries. So it's actually your fault I ate these fries because you put me under the impression that these were for both of us. So essentially, a counterclaim is like someone taking legal action and then someone else taking a contradictory legal action, but it's supposed to be related, right? So in her counterclaim, and I'm trying to decide the best way to do this. I'm trying to decide if I want to pull it up on my laptop or just pull it up on my phone so I can keep facing you guys as I go through this. Um, let's see. Let's see how good I am at reading off my phone or finding these documents in the first place on my phone. That's another thing. I went through like the trouble of organizing everything to pull it up on my laptop, and then my laptop's just like, nope, we are not going to play this game with you today. Okay, here we go. Counterclaim for Victoria Shores. And I don't know if y'all can see this, but yeah, this is a 7-page document. And so I'll just read y'all some of the significant parts of it. So the beginning of all of it just mentions things like a discovery plan, jurisdiction, and venue, monetary relief sought. So for this counterclaim, she is expecting to receive damages or some sort of monetary relief. And keep in mind, this counterclaim was filed back in April 16th, like I said. So we're talking about a couple of months ago. But when we get to the facts section of the counterclaim, Victoria Shores in her representation said, this lawsuit is necessary as a result of damages that counter plaintiffs suffered on or about March 12th, 2024. So the counter plaintiff in this case is Victoria Shores, the accuser, and March 12th is the day after Dak and his attorneys filed their lawsuit. So that person is basically saying, hey, them filing this lawsuit caused damages to me. It goes on to say, at that time, counter defendant made false statements to the press saying counter plaintiff lied about Prescott raping her back in 2017. Furthermore, counter defendant lied about counter plaintiff engaging in criminal acts such as extortion. This caused great harm to counter plaintiff's reputation and caused severe distress as this became national news. This lawsuit is also necessary as a result of damages that counter plaintiff Shores suffered from a sexual assault on or about February 2nd, 2017. Counter defendant exposed himself to counter plaintiff Shores, and after she refused his advances, proceeded to forcibly penetrate her with his penis at Ecstasy Cabaret in Dallas, Texas. It goes on to mention defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, sexual assault, and false imprisonment. So, why is this significant? If we think back to when this whole situation first started, there was the situation in Dallas County, which was what she had filed, right? She started the investigation in Dallas County, and eventually that case was closed. And Dak's lawsuit was filed in Collin County. So we had two different situations. When the situation in Dallas County was closed, if you remember back to everything that was being stated at the time, her attorney said something to the effect of, there are different things that we can sue Dak, or there are plenty of things that we can sue Dak Prescott for, and also said that they felt like it would be easier for them to handle all of this if everything was under the same jurisdiction. So in other words, he was moving the case to Collin County. So that's basically what this counterclaim is. They didn't file like a completely separate lawsuit. They just responded to Dak's lawsuit with another lawsuit. And so that's what this counterclaim is. Give me a second. Let me read some of y'all's comments. Jay said, Jazz, do you believe these accusers should start getting sentences when they false accuse these athletes and entertainers? Yes, I do. That is a felony and it should be handled as such. And now y'all are making fun of Eastside Harold. Okay, moving on. That's like the makeup of my comments. It's like really good questions from you guys and then making fun of Eastside Harold. Okay, so that was that counterclaim. Now, there are other counterclaims that have been submitted. So one other thing that it's important to recognize with this situation is that it's not just Dak suing Victoria Shores. Victoria Shores and each of her attorneys are each listed as defendants in this case. So there's three defendants, not just one. So this is just one counterclaim that we're addressing. There were also counterclaims submitted by each attorney, and there was one that I went into a little bit more detail on in my last episode when I talked about this, called an anti-SLAPP motion. And that was basically where the attorneys tried to file a motion to dismiss the case, claiming that Dak's lawsuit infringed on their First Amendment rights. And we might get into that. Honestly, when I heard about the hearing today, I thought at first that that's what this one was for. I thought it was to review whether or not that would hold up and if the case could actually be dismissed because of that, or if it was all kind of BS, which I personally, I'm not an attorney, I must say, but from everything that I know about anti-SLAPP motions and how those laws are supposed to work, especially in the state of Texas, I thought it was BS. But the hearing today was actually in reference to this counterclaim that I just read you guys. And so here's the timeline of that. So on April 16th, that counterclaim was submitted. Then on April 29th, the anti-SLAPP motion was filed, the one that we talked about last time. And then on May 15th, that is when Dak and his representation submitted a counter defendant's motion to dismiss. In other words, they're like, okay, we see that there's a counterclaim here, but we don't think it's valid. Everything that they're claiming in this counterclaim should be thrown out for one reason or another. So let me try to pull that one up, and I can give y'all some more details about what's included in that counterclaim. You said, Jazz, how do you see this sordid situation ending, both for Dak and the accuser? Y'all are trying to jump ahead. I'll let you know. I'll let you know. Okay, so this one was filed on May 15th. So we have a counter defendants. This is a really long title, you guys, if y'all can see that. This is a 24-page document, and it starts off, counter defendants motion to dismiss counter plaintiff Victoria Bailey Shore's original counterclaim petition under Rule 91A and TCPA, and motion for sanctions for frivolous pleadings. That phrase, motion for sanctions, is important. We're going to come back to it in a few minutes. But basically, Rule 91A and the TCPA, which is the Texas Citizens Participation Act. I had to remember. It's basically, so the anti-SLAPP motion, every state has their own version of it. So the Texas Citizens Participation Act is basically Texas's version of the anti-SLAPP law. That's theirs. That's what Texas calls theirs. So basically what that long ass title means is that, okay, we filed a lawsuit, there's a counterclaim because of these particular laws, statutes, rulings, whatever. We feel like we should be able to dismiss the counterclaim. And so some of the things listed in this motion to dismiss include, it starts off with a legal standard. It says, under Texas Rule of Civil Procedure 91A, a party may move to dismiss a cause of action on the grounds that it has no basis in law or fact. So this whole section of it basically goes on to say, hey, a big part of her counterclaim is based on this idea that Dak Prescott committed sexual assault, and that's not true in the first place. So if that's what she's going to base this counterclaim on, and there's no proof of that, there's no evidence of that, it's not based in fact, then we should throw it out based on that. Like, we can't argue something that's based on something that's not true, which, fair enough. Her attorneys did come back and argue that because these are civil proceedings, that they're not under the same burden of proof as they would be in an actual criminal case. That part gets a little tricky. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna leave that part up to a judge to decide. But just the concept that, okay, her counterclaim is not based in fact, I can see what they were doing with that, and I mean, I don't have a problem with it. So after the legal standard section, it goes on to say things like Shore's claims for sexual assault, and false imprisonment are barred by the applicable statute of limitations, and it goes into detail about what those are. Then there's a section that says a particular section of the TCPA and Remedies Code does not apply because Mr. Prescott was subject to personal jurisdiction in Texas at all times during the applicable statute of limitations. As stated above, the statute of limitations for a civil sexual assault case, sexual assault cause of action is 5 years. The statute of limitations for civil assault and false imprisonment is 2 years. Shore's Dallas County original petition outlandishly asserted that her statute of limitations period was tolled due to Mr. Prescott's time constantly out of state. So, in other words, what the accuser tried to claim was the statute of limitations should be extended because Dak was out of state so much, which we all know he is. He's the most important player for a team that travels, right? And so basically, Dak's attorneys are saying this doesn't apply. He was never not a resident of Texas. He was basically traveling for work and he came back. It's not like, he moved out of the state and was out of Texas's jurisdiction. Even when he was traveling, he was still under the jurisdiction. So things still could have been filed against him, motions, charges, lawsuits, whatever. They just didn't. And so the statute of limitations is like, it doesn't need to be extended. This part that they tried to claim does not apply to Dak Prescott's situation, basically. And so they basically repeated that for the statute of limitations argument related to him being beyond state's borders, and basically every single thing that she listed, because she listed assault, sexual assault, and false imprisonment. So those are the major parts of the motion to dismiss. Like I said, it's 24 pages, so clearly I'm not going to read the entire thing, but basically a lot of it was built on that. Not necessarily them even going so far as to argue the facts of the case, because they really didn't have to. They were just like, hey, everything that she submitted has no basis in law or fact. Also, they're trying to apply these particular laws in ways that they shouldn't be applied. And so, just without even getting into evidence or arguing facts and who's right or who's wrong, they did it wrong. They're just going about this the entire wrong way. So there's nothing to really argue because they haven't even submitted like a plausible motion here. Um, and so it was one of those moments where I was reading through it and it kind of made me wonder, like, I wonder what their GPA was. Like, did y'all ever take a class with somebody and like the professor would like especially like in English or literature class, right? And the professor would issue like a rubric and be like, this is what you need to include, and this is how you need to include it. And then somehow you always had people who just, for some reason, didn't get it right, even though it was laid out. Like, this is what'll get you an A, this is what'll get you a B, this is what'll get you a C. And you always had those people who are like, I don't understand why I got a C. And it's like, it says right here, this is what you need to do. That's kind of how I felt reading this, because it's like, okay, it says in the law how it applies, how it doesn't apply, what the statute of limitations is, when these laws can be used, when they can't. And yet, according to Dak's attorneys, they just keep doing things the wrong way. They keep claiming things that shouldn't be claimed, trying to apply laws and they shouldn't be applied, and trying to build a case on things that have no basis in law or fact. So they kind of set themselves up for failure by doing those things. And that's essentially what Dak's representation is pointing out in this 24-page motion to dismiss. Okay, so that happened in May. So fast forward to, we're at what's today, June 26th. So today was the hearing related to that. Hi, JV, how are you? So today was a hearing related to that. So essentially, the counterclaim was submitted in April, and the motion to dismiss that counterclaim was submitted in May. And then today was the hearing to decide, okay, are we going to dismiss this or are we not? And if we don't dismiss this, what happens next? So here's essentially what happened. And here's where it got really interesting for me as someone who's just like really invested in the credibility of all the people involved. So hold on, I'm having to scroll through documents on my phone. Is this it? Okay, here it is. It's another long title, you guys, but this was only a 6-page document. This was filed yesterday by Dak's representation. So keep in mind, They've known for weeks that there was going to be a hearing today. Well, I guess since technically it's Thursday, there was a hearing yesterday. There was a hearing on Wednesday. They've known for weeks that there was going to be a hearing on June 26th. On June 25th, what was submitted by Dak's representation was a counter defendant's brief in support of First amended motion to dismiss counter plaintiff Victoria Bailey Shore's first amended counterclaims. So essentially, I'm just going to skip ahead to the executive summary. And there's a sentence here in bold. I wish I could pull up these documents for you guys. But under the executive summary, this part is important. So if you kind of zoned out, listen up. It says, on May 29th, 2024, Mr. Prescott filed his first amended motion to dismiss after counter plaintiff Victoria Bailey Shores filed her first amended counterclaim petition on May 16th, 2024. So basically everything that I read y'all, there were amendments that were submitted. So essentially the same thing was just amended, and that's why the dates are a little bit different. Then in bold, they write, Shores has failed to file a response to Mr. Prescott's first amended motion to dismiss. Now, here's something else that y'all should know. There have been other hearings scheduled associated with this case that were canceled, presumably because they were scheduled in the first place because one party or another did not submit something that they were supposed to submit, but then that was corrected, and so the hearing was canceled. And so in this situation, we're down to a day before the hearing, and Dak's representation is like, hey, she was supposed to file something related to this hearing, and it never happened. So they continue, notwithstanding the foregoing, Mr. Prescott offers a below brief in support of his first amended motion to dismiss to address certain legal issues raised in Shore's response to Mr. Prescott's original motion to dismiss. So in other words, there was supposed to be a response, they never got it. So they're like, okay, even though we never got the response that we're supposed to receive, here's how we would have responded to the response had we received it. And so they basically go on to reiterate some of the things that they already said before that I mentioned to you guys from the motion to dismiss, because they have nothing else to respond to. The accuser did not submit the response that they were supposed to submit. So the conclusion and prayer associated with this, which is basically them saying, okay, we're done talking, here's what we hope happens next. It says, wherefore, premises considered, Mr. Prescott respectfully requests that the court grant his first amended motion pursuant to Texas Rule of Civil Procedure 91A and the TCPA, dismiss all Shore's claims against Mr. Prescott with prejudice, and award Mr. Prescott court costs, reasonable attorney's fees, and other expenses incurred in defending against this action in an amount to be determined by the court upon subsequent submission of supporting evidence. Mr. Prescott requests the court award sanctions against all counter plaintiffs. Finally, Mr. Prescott requests such other and further relief, whether at law or in equity, to which he may be justly entitled. That last sentence is basically how people say, hey, we might have missed something. So if you notice that we missed something that, we should be like awarded for, or something else that needs to happen legally in this situation, go ahead and let us know, or go ahead and take care of it. We're saying right here that however the law is supposed to apply in this situation, we want it to apply. It's basically what that last sentence means. So once again, we hear that word sanctions, which again is going to be important in a few minutes. So that was submitted. And then in the middle of the night, and this was crazy because normally we don't get documents submitted in the middle of the night before a hearing. This was so weird. Because, like I said, when I realized that the hearing was on Tuesday, I was like, okay, let me make sure I caught up with all the documents, read all the documents, caught up. I get up on Wednesday and I'm looking to see if there's anything that happened before the hearing. And I see this new document and I'm like, what on earth is this? So, 10-page document, another long title. This document is entitled Defendant Shore's Response to Plaintiff's Brief in Support of Amended Motion to Dismiss, Defendant Shore's Motion to Strike Dallas Police Investigation, and Defendant's Joint Response to Motion for Sanctions. Once again, we hear that word sanctions. It's important, so just stay with me. So, in other words, they submitted a brief the day before the hearing because they were like, hey, this chick was supposed to submit a response. She didn't. So, like, here's the thing that we were going to submit after she submitted that. It never happened. So, we're just going to do our part. So, then, essentially, the morning of the hearing, she submits this. So, it's a response to what they submitted the day before. It's also a motion to strike the Dallas police investigation from this particular situation. Now, if we rewind to the beginning of this video, the Dallas police investigation was the investigation where the Dallas Police Department was basically like, hey, we've looked into this as much as we care to look into this. We can't find any supporting evidence or anything that justifies continuing to put resources into this situation. So we're going to drop it. As far as we're concerned, this case is closed, right? And then everything moved to Collin County. And so essentially, Victoria Shores and her representation are saying, yeah, we want all that thrown out. Like, as we're judging this case, don't consider any of that. Um, and so their reasoning is, um, if you somehow get a hold of these documents, it's on page 5. So motion to strike Dallas police investigation from Rule 91A motion. They state Rule 91A says a cause of action has no basis in fact if no reasonable person could believe the facts pleaded. Plaintiff claims that because he was not arrested by Dallas police after their investigation was complete, Ms. Shore's allegation have no basis in fact under Rule 91A. All we have to show for the sexual assault claim or any other claim to be deemed as having a basis in fact is that a reasonable person would believe the facts pled. Under Rule 91A, we do not have to provide any evidence for a claim to have a basis in fact. This is a far lower burden than the standard required for police to issue a warrant for an arrest, which is probable cause. Furthermore, this is improper because under Rule 91A.6, the court cannot consider any evidence outside of the pleadings. Since plaintiff's argument is in violation of Rule 91A.1 and Rule 91A.6 of the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure, we move to strike the Dallas police investigation from plaintiff's motion and object to any argument on this matter being heard. Now, this was really weird to me because in their counterclaim, they brought up the sexual assault, right? So here they are saying, hey, we're not supposed to bring up anything outside of the pleadings. But I mean, all Dak brought up was, okay, these people are trying to get $100 million out of me. So when they start bringing up the fact that no, her accusations are true, they actually brought the sexual assault itself, not just a request for damages, into the picture, right? And so then when Dak and his representation are basically like, okay, if you're going to try to use the assault itself as a basis for your counterclaim, we're going to use the fact that law enforcement found no evidence of it as a basis for our motion to dismiss. And now they're saying, like, well, you can't do that because we're only supposed to bring up things related to the pleadings. But it's like if you read the documents and the motions in the order that they were submitted, it's kind of like, but y'all did it first. And it was okay when you thought it would help you. But now that we're like, okay, well, let's tell the whole story. Now you're saying, okay, we shouldn't even be bringing that up. So that was kind of weird to me. But once again, I'm not an attorney. I mean, and even though I felt like one today, I'm not even a paralegal. So I'm gonna leave that up to a judge to decide. Once again, that is just, my observation, my observation. So anyway, that is a part of the 10-page document that was submitted by them this morning. So then fast forward to the hearing. Now, there was no way to watch the hearing or to listen to the hearing. So I was basically going to a couple of different websites where I knew I could access legal documents and just refreshing to see if anything had been filed. And one of the first things that I saw was this. And I'm sorry, you guys, nothing about this is actually funny. The reason why I'm chuckling is because what a lot of people are looking for is more information about what Dak Prescott did or didn't do. But because of the missteps of the accuser and her attorneys, they haven't even had to get into that. Like, basically, the focus of almost everything since the lawsuit was filed has been, hey, everything that y'all are doing it wrong. And so we will throw out every single thing you submit because you're doing it wrong. And so this is another example of that. So this morning, during the time that the hearing was scheduled to take place, this document popped up. It's titled Counter Defendant's Objection to and Motion to Strike Counter Plaintiff's Untimely Response to Counter Defendant's First Amended Motion to Dismiss. So if we scroll down, they list several reasons why they should basically throw out everything that her side is doing. So I'm going to scroll down to reason number 9. I'm going to spare y'all most of this because number 9 is what well, no, we'll actually start with number 7. Starting at number 7 is where it gets really interesting. So on number 7, they said on May 31st, 2024, Mr. Prescott properly and timely noticed his hearing on his first amended motion to dismiss, which is set for June 26, 2024 at 11 a.m. That was Wednesday, yesterday. Number 8, on June 26, 2024 at 2:24 a.m., less than 9 hours before the hearing, counter plaintiff filed an untimely response to Mr. Prescott's first amended motion to dismiss. Number 9, the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure explicitly state that any response to the motion must be filed no later than 7 days before the hearing. Number 10, similarly, the Texas Citizens Participation Act explicitly states that a party responding to the motion to dismiss shall file the response, if any, not later than 7 days before the date of the hearing. 11, counterplaintiff had up until June 19, 2024 to file a response. She did not, and instead filed a response in the middle of the night, less than 9 hours before the hearing, continuing her pattern of filing frivolous pleadings in violation of numerous rules of civil procedure, attorney ethics rules, and statutes. They said civil procedure, attorney ethics rules, and statutes. So, in other words, they're saying not only are you doing it wrong, you're doing it in an unethical way, and you're also not following established law. Like, I texted somebody about this morning, and I was like, this is the most professional and legal way I've ever seen somebody called on their bullshit. Like, it's basically like, do y'all even know what you're doing? Is essentially what this is saying. Um, Accordingly, her response is untimely and must be struck. So basically, they're saying, hey, this hearing was supposed to be about whether or not this counterclaim could stand, whether or not our motion to dismiss could be granted. But we don't even need to discuss all that because they doing stuff last minute. Like that. And so the other interesting thing about this is Rule 91A and the Texas Citizens Participation Act, they are also two things that were introduced into this situation by the accuser and her representation because they're the ones who filed the anti-slap motion, right? And so when they did that, that was when Dak and his representation were like, well, we're going to file a motion to dismiss that too. So basically, the laws that they're trying to use to get Dak's case thrown out, they're not even following those particular statutes properly. Not even when it comes down to when they're supposed to submit certain things. Like they can't even get the timeline right, much less the content. Y'all give me 1 second. I need to take a sip of water. Okay. So it ends, wherefore premises considered, counter defendant respectfully requests that the court strike counter plaintiff's response as untimely and for such other and further relief, whether at law or in equity, to which he may be justly entitled. So those were the documents that were submitted today. Now, after that, I don't know what was said during the hearing. I don't know if their motion was granted because of that or because of something else. But what I can tell you is that the motion was granted. So I'm going to go back to this other website real quick and just kind of pull up a couple of things that I want to make sure that y'all see because it's going to explain why the situation is not necessarily over. So here's one thing that I would pull up on the screen if I could. So these are like, this is like the last page. This is page 4 of 5 pages of events that that have happened related to this case. So there's a motion to dismiss listed as June 26th, and there's a response, and there's an objection, and there's a judge's docket entry, and then there's a motion for sanctions. So we're going to start with this motion to dismiss. So the motion to dismiss, it lists basically the documents that this was related to. So I think some of the other headlines said that the lawsuit against Dak Prescott has been dropped. Yes and no. What's listed under the documents for this particular hearing is the counter defendant's first amended motion to dismiss counterplaintiff Shore's first amended counterclaim petition under Rule 91A, blah, 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 blah. All the stuff that I read to you before, right? So in other words, this hearing was for that. So one thing that we have to remember is that there are two other defendants and there are other motions and other motions to dismiss those motions that still have yet to be addressed, right? So this hearing was just for one thing. And if we go up to the top, I don't know if y'all can, like, my phone is in the way of the camera, so I don't even know if y'all can see that. But where it says status, it says pending. If everything were done, it would say the case is closed. So the fact that it says pending and the fact that under motion to dismiss, it only lists these specific documents, that lets me know they're not done. So that got a win today. And I mean, between me and you, and the 100 or so people who seem to be watching this on Twitter, um, I think we'll see more of these types of wins. So that got a win today. He'll probably get more, but there's other things that have to happen in this case. So that's what happened today is the motion to dismiss that counterclaim was granted. So once again, if you're following along in your textbooks, Dak Dak started this lawsuit in March. There was a counterclaim submitted in April. There was a motion to dismiss the counterclaim submitted in May. There were amendments submitted amidst those 2 months. And then there was a hearing for that particular counterclaim today to find out if it would stand or if it would be dismissed. So that particular counterclaim that we discussed today, it has been dismissed. So then there's the response that I told you about where it's like, hey, they submitted this untimely stuff. So there's the response, the objection, and then we have what's called the judge's docket entry. So that's where it says motion to dismiss granted. An order is forthcoming from plaintiff, and there's a motion for sanctions. So this is why I kept saying that the word sanctions is important. Because I read two different articles today that said that there's going to be a hearing for sanctions against the accuser, right? But everybody has requested sanctions from everybody else. So if we go to page 5, which is the last page, it's where it details the motion for sanctions. And so it lets us know that this hearing is going to take place. I don't know, y'all can y'all see that? It lets us know that this hearing is going to take place on September 13th at 1:30 p.m. and that it'll be 2 hours per side. So this won't be like, hey, everybody show up. We're going to tell you what we're going to do to this woman for everything that she's put the court through. It's going to be 2 hours per side. So a 4-hour hearing where they're going to discuss the sanctions. That's all the details I know. I don't know who's at risk of having to deal with what, but that is September 13th. So I think the last time we discussed this, someone asked, like, is this going to roll over into the season? So now we know the answer to that question is yes, because September 13th, I believe, is 2 days before the Cowboys play the Saints at home. JV's like, September? Yes, September. That's a long way from now. And I don't know if that date was picked because there's so much going on between now and then in terms of Dak's obligations, or if that's when the court is going to be available. I don't know. These these are questions that I know need answers, but I don't have those particular answers. All I can tell you is that it's scheduled for September 13th. Now, here's some other interesting things that have happened in the midst of all this, though. And depending on how these particular things play out, I think we might get some more details in terms of what people actually want to know, which is people are still wondering, like, okay, we see all these motions to dismiss, counterclaims going back and forth, but I feel like most people who are publicly interested in this case really just want to know who's lying and who's not. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily what this case is set up to do. But because of some of the things that are happening amidst all this, I think we might get some insight into that. So, one of the things that has happened since the last time that we talked about this is a notice of appearance of counsel. So, what does that mean? Essentially, when Dak first filed the lawsuit, he filed it against 3 people. That was Victoria Shores, the accuser, and her 2 attorneys, Yoel and Bethel Zehaie, right? And so it was just the 3 of them. They were still acting as the accuser's attorneys, even though they were also defendants in the lawsuit. So if we fast forward, and I'm not gonna show this one to the screen because there are addresses and stuff listed on it. But where is it? Mm, mm, mm. I might not have uploaded this one. Oh, I think I didn't upload it because I knew I wasn't gonna show it on the screen. But I'm still gonna read what it says. So it says Monroe Solomon III and Harry E. White of Nichols White Solomon, who filed this notice of appearance of counsel for defendant Bethel T. Zehaie in the above entitled and numbered case, the above entitled and numbered cause, and respectfully show that they have been retained as counsel for only defendant Bethel T. Zehaie. So, in other words, this one defendant, who was also an attorney for the accuser, they went and got their own attorney. So not even like their partner. They weren't like, hey, instead of me representing myself, why don't you represent both of us? They went and got their own attorney. And they're like, no, this is my attorney. This is not our attorney. This is my attorney. And so considering that the two attorneys, at least, have the same last name and have submitted joint motions in this case, to me, it was kind of weird that this one person got their own attorney. So once again, I don't know what that means. I don't know if there's trouble in paradise. Like I know in the description, I was like, if you put this in football terms, they might be dealing with some locker room drama because that just kind of seems kind of weird. Um, because if you have the same last name as somebody, you're related in some way, whether you're married, your siblings, cousins, whatever, there's a connection there. And so if I'm a defendant and my family member is a defendant and they go and get their own attorney and I'm an attorney, I'm like, okay, so what exactly is happening here, right? So that was interesting. So now moving forward, ever since then, we've seen these attorneys' names on a lot of the documentation because this person is like, I have my own representation now. Good luck to y'all. And then something else that was even more interesting. Let me see if I pulled up that document here. Oh no, I didn't because there was also an address on this other one. There's a lot of sensitive information just floating out there. Let's see. It was called motion to withdraw. So, a motion to withdraw is basically when an attorney says, I don't want to represent this person anymore. And sometimes it's mutual, like an attorney and a client together say, like, hey, the client is going to get new representation. So I, as the attorney, need to submit a motion to withdraw so they have room to do that. That's not what happened in this case. So let me read to y'all what happened here. Or I'm going to read to y'all the document. This one's really short, but I'm only going to read y'all the first two paragraphs. It's 4 pages, but we're going to read half a page. It says, movements Yoel and Bethel Zehaie, those are the attorneys, are currently attorneys of record for Victoria Shores. That's the accuser. The interests of Miss Shores are no longer aligned with Yoel and Bethel Zehaie. Due to what is in the best interest of Miss Shores, Yoel and Bethel Zehaie respectfully request an order granting this motion. Now, before I continue, this was submitted 2 days before this hearing. 2 days. They go on. Pursuant to Rule 10 of the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure, we certify that a copy of this motion has been forwarded to Ms. Shores. She has been notified through writing of her right to object, and Ms. Shores does, in fact, object to the motion. So they're saying she objects to this motion. So, in other words, they're filing a motion to withdraw as her attorneys. They're saying, we don't want to be her attorneys anymore. Like, just like we understand we're still defendants, but we are no longer representing her. And she has the right to object. And as a matter of fact, she does object. We're telling you she does, but she still has to write in. So essentially, she doesn't have attorneys going forward because for whatever reason, all they said in this document is that their interests are no longer aligned. I don't know what that means. Because of the way legalese works, that could mean anything from, hey, she didn't pay us on time, so we're not representing her anymore, to, hey, we talked and we don't see eye to eye on how this case should move forward from now on, and so she needs to find somebody else to represent her. Either way, they're basically telling the judge, yo, she needs to find some new attorneys because it's not going to be us. And so I saw that and I was like, whoa. Because I'm like, first of all, who are you going to find that's going to pick up this case with the mess that you've made of it? Y'all have submitted like 5 different counterclaims on this case, and there are motions to dismiss pending on several of them. And now you just want another attorney or team of attorneys to just jump in here and represent her? Like, that is wild. Like, that is a lot of action to happen in a legal situation to just expect somebody to come and pick up and take over. And then the fact that she objects, it's like, okay, so that's not good. That means she probably doesn't have anybody lined up. And then, like, what exactly is going on to where y'all have been in cahoots on this thing from the beginning of the year? All of a sudden, June rolls around. We finally have a hearing that's not canceled, and y'all are just like, you know what? We don't want to represent her anymore. So there might be a hearing to address this, because here's what happens in the case of a motion to withdraw. Here's how it works in Collin County of Texas, at least. So there are a couple of things that need to happen. So once again, we see an example of the attorneys, they're doing something and they're not doing it right. Because a motion to withdraw should include the client's last known email address. It didn't. They put her last known physical address, but they didn't put her email address. So I don't know. The judge might come back and be like, hey, y'all need to amend this and submit it the right way, because y'all didn't even include the information that's supposed to be on here. So once again, for like the 4th time in these proceedings, we see them submitting something just the wrong ass way. And even though there's nothing that stops them from submitting that 2 days before a hearing, it's kind of messed up that they submitted that 2 days before a hearing, because it's like now it's kind of out there that we don't want to represent you, but because the hearing is coming up, we kind of have to. So it's like, did you even try? What was that document maybe submitted late on purpose because like y'all don't want to represent this woman anymore anyway? And then the other thing that goes along with the motion to withdraw is that the client has 10 days to object. So they've acknowledged in their motion to withdraw that Victoria Shores does object to the motion. So she has 10 days to draw that up. Now, assuming she wants to do it right, she's going to have to secure representation to assist her with this motion. And that representation is basically going to have to help her get her old representation back. The whole situation is just messy, and I don't see this playing out well for her. So somebody asked way, way, way earlier in the video, how do I see this playing out? Well, the first thing that's going to happen is this motion to withdraw has to be handled, because this was submitted on June 24th. So that means that as of July 4th, well, I don't know how they're going to count the holidays and stuff, but sometime in early July, we are going to hear about what's happening with this motion to withdraw, because she's either going to submit her objection in writing, and then they'll probably have to have a hearing to go over that, or she's not going to submit anything. The motion to withdraw will be granted, and she's going to have to get new representation. And so when the new representation comes around, I know I, for one, am going to be investigating them to see if there's anything of note to tell you guys about those people. And also, there's probably going to be some other motions and things associated with that that may be relevant to the case. So even though we don't know anything right now about why they submitted this motion to withdraw, which is like, I just cannot get over how crazy that is. Um, as things play out, we might hear more about what exactly happened in the situation that led to this. So that's the first thing that's going to happen. Also, the sanctions hearing, 2 hours per side. There's a lot that can happen with a hearing that long. And like I said, that hearing is going to take place, or it's currently scheduled, I should say, because there have been 2 hearings that were scheduled and then subsequently canceled already. So that hearing is currently scheduled to take place the weekend before the Cowboys home game against the Saints. So that leaves a lot of time for things to happen. If the accuser does get new representation, they might advise her to like not move forward with this at all, right? In which case, because this particular motion has already been granted and there's already a hearing for sanctions, if any sanctions do apply against her, that will happen. But like some of the other motions that haven't been addressed yet, they might be, I don't know, dismissed, thrown out, whatever. But in a nutshell, I don't see this playing out well for her. I already didn't see this playing out well, and that was before her attorneys came and said, we don't want to represent you. Um, and it's like, let's be real. like I feel like all of us, we've worked with attorneys before, we've been in legal situations before, we've heard enough about legal situations to know that one thing an attorney is not going to do is give up their opportunity to make some money, especially not after they put this much work in, right? So for them to withdraw as representation for this woman, they must really believe there's no hope there, because otherwise they wouldn't do that. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, we're about to win this case, but actually we don't want to do this anymore. I know the only way these two people would do this is if they themselves don't see this playing out well for her, and now they're like, I got to look out for myself, because Yoel is representing himself. Bethel has hired other representation, so they already have plans for how they're going to move forward with the fact that they're defendants. And Victoria Shores, who knows? All we know is they submitted a motion to withdraw and she objects to the motion, and that's not good because she's got a hearing for sanctions coming up in less than 3 months. So yeah, that's where we are. So let me just quickly tell y'all about some of the other motions that have been filed that have not been addressed yet. um so like I said, there's three defendants on this case. Um, so each of them submitted a counterclaim. So, like I said, this hearing was just about Victoria Shore's counterclaims. There's also a counterclaim that was submitted for Yoel Zehaie. There was a counterclaim submitted by Bethel Zehaie. Um, if we fast forward, both sides requested a trial by jury, right? So that's something that still hasn't even been discussed yet. There were amended answers, and then there was the anti-SLAPP motion, and then there was the motion to dismiss the anti-SLAPP motion. So we have at least three counterclaims that haven't been resolved yet. So that's why the case still says that it's pending. That's why, even though today's news was good news for that, there's still more that needs to be discussed, because just like there was a hearing for that particular counterclaim today, there have to be hearings for all the other stuff that was filed as well. So at some point, those things are going to be discussed. Um, Now, as far as a trial by jury, the trial by jury can't really happen until they know what is going to be heard from each side. So, in other words, before they can like put a jury together and decide like, okay, what is actually going to happen on this trial, they would have had to decide, okay, is this counterclaim legitimate, right? Because you have to go into trial knowing, okay, is this something that needs to be taken into consideration, or is this something that doesn't even matter? And so that's why that side submitted the motion to dismiss, because they were basically saying like, hey, this is something that shouldn't even matter when this does go to trial. And whether it was because of an untimely response or because the argument itself literally had no basis, the judge granted their motion to dismiss. Um, so yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything for now. There's a lot going on. But do y'all have any questions? Y'all left a lot of comments, which I appreciate. I love the activity. As a matter of fact, while y'all are at it, don't forget to hit that like button. If you're watching on the Twitter side, at least like the post, and like not like okay, so on Twitter you can like click on a thing and it takes you into like this video player where you have like little hearts that disappear. Not in there. Like go to my Twitter feed and like that post and repost it. And better yet, find the YouTube link that I shared and come over to YouTube, give me some views, and like the YouTube video, please. But if you're already watching on YouTube, yeah, please like the video, please, and thank you. And thank you for all the activity in the chat tonight. Y'all are awesome. Um, so JV said, I'm pleasantly surprised it's not throughout mainstream media right now. I think mainstream media, I honestly, I think a lot of people weren't up to speed on it, because I saw WFAA write an article that kind of, I don't want to be disrespectful towards them, but the way it was written led me to believe that they didn't do a lot of research into this situation. And I saw ESPN submit or post an article that led me to similar trains of thought. So I think folks just hadn't really been keeping up with it. Like it just kind of like was put on the back burner for a lot of people. And then somebody was like, hey, there was a hearing today and this thing happened. And then they were like, oh, we should say something about it, right? And it's like, and here's the thing about it. If you don't actually read the documents, which I can't really blame anybody who didn't, because if you're trying to report on it today, that was a lot to read through for me to even get straight which counterclaims and which motions to dismiss were being addressed today, right? So if you're a reporter who has to write several things or you only have a certain amount of time to put something out, I can understand why maybe you didn't get all the details correct, right? Um, but it really is a lot to dig into. And so I think that's why a lot of people haven't reported on it yet. And if you go to, so like there's two different main websites that I go to. There's actually like several websites that I use, but like there's two main ones that I go to whenever I'm trying to like get the latest in something. And so there's one that's free that kind of gives you like the rundown, like, oh, there's a hearing scheduled, oh, there was a document submitted, but you actually can't see what the documents say or anything like that. You can just see, okay, there was a motion filed, oh, the motion was granted, yada yada yada, but you don't see details, right? So like the information about what was being discussed at the hearing today, I don't even know if it was on the free website. Let me see. Motion to dismiss, yeah, it was. So like the list of the documents is there, but you can't see what the documents actually contain, right? Then there's another website that I go to where I actually have to pay money, but it actually lets me see the documents that have been filed and actually read through them. And that is actually what I had to read through a lot today and purchase a few documents. So shout out to the people who have been sending me stuff via Cash App. I appreciate it. It's going towards content like this. Um, but yeah, so I went on that website today, and that's where I was able to get the details of what was in the documents, and the details of the counterclaims. And even then, like I said, some of these documents are like 24 pages long. So it's like unless you were assigned to this case, and like, okay, as a reporter, as a journalist, this is what you cover, and that's it. I can see it being kind of difficult to get all the details right, because I don't have a boss. It's up to me if I go live or if I don't. It's up to me what I cover and what I don't cover. And so I said, okay, I'm not going to talk about the NBA draft today. I'm not going to talk about some of the trades that have happened in the NBA. I'm going to talk about this and this only. And that was my choice, and I was able to do that. For some people who reporting on sports is their full-time job, they don't necessarily have that luxury. So while it was like kind of frustrating seeing the way it was covered by a couple of sources, I'm also inclined to give those folks some grace because I know what it took for me to be able to even halfway make this make sense. So I'm going to give other people some grace who maybe don't have as much time or the resources to dedicate to this kind of thing. So it is what it is. Let's see. The only media source who tried to condemn, oh wait, hold on. Things are scrolling too fast. The only media source who tried to condemn Dak about the situation was 103.5 The Fan. They really brought on the accuser's attorney, who's no longer attorney, and thought they did something with that smear campaign. That was a mess. That was a mess. And the situation might not be over for them either. Depending on how it plays out, they might have to deal with some actions taken against them. But that's not anything that we have to address right now. That'll come out in the future if it happens. JV says, does it give the impression that even the media believes this is in direct contradiction to Dak's persona? So they're not really caring about this particular case. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Um, I think part of it is that I think the bigger issue is that when it comes to mainstream media, what they usually try to do is report on things or report in such a way and create content that's really engaging, that gets people talking, that is like easily digestible. So you might hear the term low hanging fruit from Cowboys content creators a lot when referring to mainstream media. Um, and the way this case has progressed, it's not exactly easily digestible. It's not easy to talk about because, like I said earlier, what people want to know is who's lying, who's right, who's wrong. Did Dak actually do it, or is this woman just out for his money? And so she's making up stuff to try to get his money. That's the part that most of the public is interested in, especially when we're talking about the public that watches ESPN. If you were to go on ESPN and start talking about anti-slap motions and motions to dismiss and untimely submissions and the Texas Citizens Participation Act, people are gonna tune out, honestly. Like, I'm happy that so many of y'all are here listening to me talk about this because I like nerding out on this stuff. And I also want y'all to have accurate information. Like, if the case isn't over, I want y'all to know that it's not over, and I want y'all to know why, and I want y'all to know what's coming next. Because as Cowboys fans, as Dak Prescott fans, I think it's important for us, if we discuss this issue, to be able to discuss the facts and to be able to discuss it responsibly. And you can't do that unless you know the truth and unless you know the details, right? Um, but honestly, like the last few times I've been discussing this, I've been surprised at the number of views these videos have gotten. I'm like, y'all actually want to sit here and listen to me, like read read counterclaims and, and legal documents? Okay, let's do it. And I love this as much as y'all love me, apparently. So hey, we can have fun with it. But yeah, I don't see the masses, in terms of the millions of people who watch mainstream sports media, being as interested as you all are as my audience. So I think that's a bigger issue. Jalen Barty says, "Yep, it was all a money grab. She crapped out with no evidence and thought Dak would just pay her hush money for something he never did." One of the hardest parts of covering this situation has been, um, me trying to be respectful in the sense that, how can I put it? When it comes to like innocent until proven guilty, I believe Dak is innocent until proven guilty, but I also, as much as possible, I try to give accusers the benefit of the doubt. In other words, even if what they say happened didn't happen, at least from their perspective, something happened, right? But in this case, that just becomes harder and harder to do. This is one of those situations where, and I'll tell y'all one of the things that has been bugging me a lot. And this is something that I've been avoiding saying because I don't want my bias to like color y'all's interpretation of the situation. So there's a lot of stuff in terms of my personal thoughts on this case that I've kept to myself because I'm like, I just want to present y'all with the facts. But I'm gonna share one thing that's been bugging me since I first started looking into this case. So y'all ready? Okay, here it goes. If you read her claims, against Dak Prescott, the account of what she said happened. She said, we were going out with some other people to the strip club. We were in the back of this SUV when we got there. Everybody got out. And so I'm just like, okay, when it comes to evidence that supports what you're saying, like nobody else who was there like has anything to say about what happened. Like you can't find a single other person who was there. So that to me says either like somehow y'all were with a group of people and like, you know, nobody is willing to account for what happened after that happened because it's like if you like if I go somewhere with a group of people, right? I'm not even gonna say like if she did this, I'm gonna put myself in a situation. If I go somewhere with a group of people, and I think the original document said that it was, men and women in the group. It was like some people in Dak's entourage, and they had other women with them, right? So if I go somewhere with a group of people and we're in an SUV and I'm in the back of the SUV and everybody gets out, right? Well, first of all, I'm gonna get out. And so if I don't get out of the SUV, that means something violent happened to keep me there, right? Now, let's say for whatever reason, nothing violent happened. Let's just like, move on from there. We're in the back of the SUV. So then what happened? Like, did I just stay there? Did the person who drove me there drive me home? Did I get out and go to this strip club? Did anybody see me inside? Did I just like, oh, this happened. I'm gonna just catch an Uber home. Like, there are just so many details that I'm just like, if you could at least fill in the details or get someone to say something, like that would be helpful. But I'm just like, why is it that nobody else who was there Because she said there were other people there. This is not me making this up. She said there were other people there. Why is it that nobody else who was there is willing to say anything about what happened? And I'm not saying that she's lying. She could be telling the truth. And for whatever reason, nobody else who was there, like not a single person, not a man, not a woman, not anybody in the strip club, not whoever drove her home, nobody wants to say anything about what they saw, what they heard, her state after the incident, nothing. That bothers me, y'all. And so I'm like, for that to be the case, either Dak Prescott is a real life supervillain, or there's just not enough here for anybody to feel comfortable putting their neck on the line like that. So I want to reiterate, that's just like that's me reading the situation. This is not based on anybody I've talked to, anything I've read, anything I've heard. That has like everything I just said has no bearing on this case whatsoever. That's just me as an observer thinking about this case, and people keep saying like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, what do you think? That's the one thing that's bothered me from the beginning. That's the one thing that I can't get past. Like that. So every time a new motion comes up, I kind of expect it to fall apart, because the one thing that you need for a foundation, from my perspective, isn't there. So there hasn't been a single thing that they've submitted that I expect to have any substance or any bearing, because I'm like, from jump, you failed to provide any evidence, any witnesses, any, like, even any detail. Like, even if you don't have any witnesses about what happened, just say in your statement what happened. Everybody got out the SUV, this happened, and then I went in the strip club and da da da, or then I ordered an Uber and I left. But it's just like, yeah, everybody got out the SUV and this happened, and then the story ends. And it's just like, hold on. Where did all these people go? Nobody noticed he was missing. Like, it's just so, it bugs me. It bugs me. A rule of two said maybe she just wanted $100 million. Shit, I want $100 million. Who wouldn't want $100 million? Um, yeah, and that's another thing. Like, she could be telling the truth and also committing extortion. Like, even if this did happen, that doesn't mean that this isn't extortion. Because whether what she said happened or not, if you send somebody a demand letter and say, give me $100 million or I'm taking legal action against you, that's extortion, you know? So it's just like, it, she just hasn't really helped herself in this situation. So either way, like, yeah. Jalen Party says, when you get SA, okay, I see what you're saying. You have to go get tested immediately after. That's the recommendation. Like, there's nothing that's going to force them to do a rape kit. There's no evidence she even did that. You're right. As a matter of fact, I think that was one of the things that the police department looked for and they couldn't find it. Um, Plus, this happened years ago. Come on now, that would have been front page news when it occurred. Um, Maybe, probably way earlier in Dak's career, so it's hard to say. Um, Jalen Brady says no witnesses either. Yeah, yeah, that's the one thing that's been bothering me. So now y'all know. Now y'all know why every time y'all be like, "What do you think is gonna happen?" Why I kind of pause and look away, and I just kind of try to put it on the justice system. That's why. That's what I've been trying to avoid saying this entire time. I didn't want to put that out there, but now it's out there. So if you've been watching, that was an exclusive. Let me see if y'all have any other comments or questions that I need to answer. Um, you do a phenomenal job covering this case. Thank you, JV. Duh, 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 duh. Let's see, what else? What else? What else? If they had real evidence, bro, this is Jay Lombardi talking to JV. This would have been out there years ago, right after it happened. It's Dak Prescott. Arguably, that's not unreasonable to believe. Stuff like this doesn't go away, and if he was guilty, the media would have given him the Watson treatment. Facts. Dak is under every microscope as Dallas QB1 that watches every move. This type of accusation doesn't get swept under a rug when you're Dak Prescott. This would have been on every media site years ago. Facts, facts, facts. Okay, so I'm not seeing any like major questions. So let's keep it real. Says she wasn't going to win against a $1 billion company. Dak represents the Dallas. Oh, too many comments. Dak represents the Cowboys. That's Texas. I'm glad you mentioned. Ah, I'm glad you mentioned the main letter. Shit, that is the pure definition of extortion. Agreed. Extortion and false accusing deserves jail time in my book. Um, and I mean, the way most laws are written, that is what's supposed to happen. And it's not that I feel like people need to be punished. My thing is this: every time a person brings up false accusations against another person, especially when it's related to sexual assault, it makes it harder for people to believe future accusers, you know? So, as someone who, like, my heart goes out to actual victims, I despise anything that makes it harder for victims, you know? And situations like this do make it harder for victims because people who don't want to believe victims, they just point to situations like this and numerous other situations that have happened to various sports figures over the past few years and say, well, you know, this woman just did it as a money grab. And this woman, you know, they found text messages proving that she was lying and she was just jealous of his, you know, new girlfriend. Oh, and there's this other situation. It's like they have so many examples of people making accusations just to get money or just to be vindictive or just to exact revenge. And it's like that's the last thing that needs to happen in a case in situations that are already so sensitive. So many of these accusations already rely so much on he said, she said, and very little evidence and few witnesses. It's so hard on accusers and actual victims, you know? So when stuff like this happens, it's really frustrating because I'm like, great, here's something else that people are going to use when they don't want to believe victims, when they don't want to believe, you know, women who have experienced some like really horrible things. This is something else that they can point to when they just want to dismiss a woman's claims and just and throw it out and not talk about it, you know? People didn't believe Cassie until they saw the video. But here's the thing about Cassie's situation. At least there were other people saying, yeah, Diddy is a messed up person, right? Like there were people who have said it before and those people were kind of dismissed, but and there are people who are saying it, like who are even coming out and saying it now, like saying, yeah, I saw XYZ and I didn't say anything because of such and such, right? But there were other people in this situation. There Nobody else has said anything. Nobody has said anything about anything that happened in the car. Nobody has said, oh well, you know, Dak does seem like the type of person who would da da da. Like nobody, you know. So it's different from the Cassie situation in that regard. JV said, could the Joneses be using this case to still be slow in extending him? Um, I'm not going to accuse the Joneses of using this case to do that. Could it have something to do with it? That's not outside of the realm of possibility, especially considering that in Dak's first petition, um, hold on, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. It won't show up on your screen, but in Dak's first petition, he mentions some of the damages that he's experiencing because of this. And one of the things he says is, so he lists several causes of action, and one of them is business disparagement. And it says plaintiff incorporates by reference each and every allegation contained in the paragraphs above, as if the same were set forth in full herein. Defendants made false and malicious statements against Mr. Prescott and his business as a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. Defendant statements proximately caused Defendant statements proximately caused the general and special damages suffered by Mr. Prescott and his business as a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, which are in excess of the minimum jurisdictional limits of this court. So it doesn't go into specifics, but it does list business disparagement as a cause of action and does say that his business as a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys has suffered because of the charges brought against him. So I won't go so far as to say that the Joneses are using this to be slow in extending him. But it does seem that Dak and his representation have some reason to believe that these allegations have impacted his business as a quarterback. But as far as the extension, honestly, there's an argument to be made that for Dak's benefit, it might be best for him to reach unrestricted free agency. Because I mean, if you want to know what you're worth as a player, like that's where you want to get to. So it could be either side at this point that's holding up the negotiations. Like maybe Dak is like, you know what, I'm worth more than what you're putting on the table, and I'm gonna prove it. And he's gonna take this season and play his ass off, and then hit unrestricted free agency in 2025 and then see what he's really worth, see what the market really has to say about him. Um, or it could be the Joneses who are just dragging their feet, I don't know. But at this point, I'm like, I would believe either way. Storm says, this is my first time listening in. My question is, when did she file the report? What year? Um, So she technically never filed a report until after Dak filed his lawsuit. So she claimed that the incident happened in, was it 2017? Yes. So she claimed that the assault occurred on February 2nd, 2017. But there was no report filed. There were no charges filed at this time. So this is for Storm and anybody else who this is their first time listening in. So there were no charges filed, no reports submitted at that time in February 2nd of 2017. Fast forward to 2024. um, I think the date of the original was like 2 days after. I didn't pull it up because I didn't expect to go into detail, but I think it was 2 days after the loss to the Green Bay Packers is when this letter reached Dak Prescott. But it was a demand letter that was written by her and her attorneys. So about 7 years after the incident that she claimed happened is when she sent a demand letter to Dak Prescott and essentially said, "Hey, this happened, you did this to me, and ever since then I've had to go to therapy, a relationship was ruined because of it, and a bunch of other stuff happened to me. I'm dealing with emotional distress and other damages. So I want you to pay me $100 million in damages for everything that I went through. And if you don't pay me $100 million, then I'm going to take legal action against you." And so Dak and his attorneys were like, "Hey, you're asking me for money in exchange for not taking legal action against me. That's extortion. And so I'm going to sue you for sending me this demand letter." And then 2 days later, she took legal action because he didn't pay her. So that's the timeline. That's how that happened. Jalen Barty said, "Jazz, thank you for your time. Love your breakdown on this one. Thank you. Thank you for watching." Um, Ryan said, "You need evidence like Cassie video of Diddy." For a lot of people to believe this one, yeah, you might need some sort of video or something more than what we have, Brian. Something more than what we have is what a lot of people are going to need at this point. Not only because of just the lack of evidence that there is, right? But also because of how everything's played out since then. Everything that's played out since then just really supports the idea that this is a money grab, because it's almost like, okay, the demand letter didn't work. So we are just going to grasp at any statute that we can to possibly get some money out of this guy. Like the attorney actually said, "Oh, there's several things that we can sue him for," which is a really weird thing to say whenever you're actually seeking justice in a sexual assault case, right? So every move that they've made ever since sending the demand letter does kind of have undertones of like, okay, the most important part at this point is money. Um, and so I think that's why more and more people are leaning into the idea of, okay, these people are just trying to get money and not actually seek justice because nothing happened. And like I said, um, even if she is telling the truth, she could still be committing extortion, right? But for a lot of people in their minds, it's either or. If this is a money grab, then she must have been lying. And if she's telling the truth, this is more than a money grab. So for a lot of people in their minds, the two are like mutually exclusive. So yeah, you would need something like video evidence, audio evidence, something to convince a lot of people in the court of public opinion at this point. Jay says, "Facts, Jazz. There's victims out there, but the ones who lie really make me sick because that's something a man can't scrub from his character." Facts. Because people always accuse you of that. Yeah. That is one thing that I'm glad hasn't happened in this situation. I'm glad people aren't putting that label on Dak. Well, except for a few people that we talked about earlier. But I'm glad people aren't putting that label on Dak unjustly. Norman says, "You just made a great point. People stepped up when it came to Diddy." Yeah. As a fan of your show, allow me to say this to you and your audience. What are you saying? Law Nation, hey Law. I don't know if you're still here, Law, but thanks for watching. Law said it's an evil world we live in. Absolutely. Man, there's some people out here. You got to be careful. Um, Norman continues. Let me baptize you with some real talk. I'm scrolling out. I'm like, I want to see what Norman said. Maybe Norman is still typing. Storm says it's definitely a money shakedown if she waited 7 years to file a report where there's no physical evidence, no marks, no bodily fluids. This is just extortion. A real victim would go to the police and have visible marks, etc. And by the way, thank you for hosting this, Storm says. You're welcome. Now, I will say this. There are women, there are men actually. I have male friends who have been victims of sexual assault. So that's why a lot of times when I talk about sexual assault and things like that, I'll say people because I've heard people of various genders talk about these experiences. There aren't always marks. There are some situations where there are, and the situations get really violent. And there are some situations where a person might be under the influence of something that they did not intend to imbibe. There are some situations where a person might feel pressured or they might feel extorted in the situation that they're in, right? So there are a lot of situations where there are not necessarily visible marks or anything like that, even though a crime was committed. So I don't want to make that like a standard for believing victims, right? Um, and also, there are a lot of real victims who don't go to the police, like the case of my male friends. Like, I've had male friends who did not realize that they were assaulted, that by definition of the law, what they experienced was assault until they like told me about their situation. And I'm just like, yo, that is not okay for like what happened is not okay. um, Sometimes they are scared, which in the case of men, like sometimes your manhood can be taken into question, even if it's a woman who did it to you, which like both of my male friends who experienced this, it was women who did it to them. In one case, it was a guy. He was in a relationship at the time, but he went to a party and he was like, I don't know if I drank too much or someone put something in my drink, but he was like, I felt like I definitely was way more drunk than I'm used to being. I went to lay down. He was like, next thing I know, this woman was on top of me. And I was just like, that's rape. And he was like, well, I didn't want to say anything because it sounds crazy as a man to say a woman raped me. And I was just like, I'm not going to force you to do anything, but I'm just letting you know, like, if you feel like you need to talk to somebody, seek therapy, like, yeah, that's a traumatic experience. And he didn't even come to me to like tell me this happened. He was like, do I have to tell my girl I cheated? And I'm like, yo, there are like way bigger issues at here, like at play here, and hopefully your girl is a little bit more sympathetic than to be like to like break up with you after somebody takes advantage of you that way. But like, yeah, crazy things happen, right? And so not every situation plays out the same way, but there are some situations where it does become increasingly obvious that a person is being untruthful or that they are bending facts or sometimes using the lack of evidence to their advantage, right? And those are the situations that really bother me. Norman says, I live in Sin City. That game is real and alive here 24/7. I've seen many people lose it all over. But I mean, it happens in a lot of situations. There's a show on Hulu right now called Clips about it's not necessarily sexual assault, but they're talking about the situation of Donald Sterling and how he basically lost his empire over pussy basically. And so even though it's not that same, it's not like an illegal act took place, right? But what you're referring to as that game, right, where it's like people will use all sorts of things to take advantage of someone else and get one over on them for the sake of getting money or getting something that they have or exacting revenge or whatever. That game, yeah, that game plays out in a lot of ways. So yeah, there are a lot of people in this world who lose everything over bullshit. So. Jay said men can very much be victims too. They can. And I wish there was more space for men to talk about those issues and deal with them, but we're getting there. By the way, it's Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, so um, shout out to that. since we kind of brought it up in a roundabout way. But yeah, any more questions about Dak? Any last minute? I'm kind of afraid to ask y'all if y'all have any Cowboys questions because I'm gonna be honest, I've been focusing on packing and getting out of here. I am not as much in the loop as y'all would probably like me to be. Jay says that's why I never went to random hotel rooms over there. Heard the stories myself. Mm, that is wild. I didn't know it was going down like that in Vegas. But stay safe out there, y'all. Stay safe. But yeah, I think that's everything. So I don't know if I'm gonna go live again this week because, like I said, stuff is weird with my internet and or my laptop. I don't know which one it is at this point. Maybe moving and being with a new internet service provider will fix everything. Maybe the problem is my laptop and I need to buy a new laptop. In which case, I will definitely be like flashing my Cash App up on the screen a lot more. Um, but yeah, for now, because I actually, like I said at the beginning, I gotta be up earlier than I thought I was, than I thought I did. Even non-Cowboys fans know that Dak was in line to get the bag. This shit was well timed. Maybe that is one aspect of this is a conspiracy that I'm not gonna lean too much into that. That's a lot. That's a lot. But y'all as the audience, feel free to have fun with that. But all that being said, we've done this for 90 minutes, so I hope everybody feels well informed. If you're watching this after the fact and you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments or find me on Twitter. Um, I'm happy to answer them. Brian said, "What do you think about the Cowboys signing and working out UFL players?" I think it's smart. They've done it before. We've gotten some solid players from the leagues that make up the UFL are the XFL and the what was the name of that league before it was UFL? It was the USFL. So yeah, the USFL and the XFL came together and made the UFL, and so we've got some solid USFL players. And so now they're, continuing that same pattern with UFL. So I'm here for it. Um, anyway, that being said, thanks for listening. Thanks for nerding out with me. Thanks for tuning in to hear the details and the truth of the situation. And I'll be back soon, probably next week when I have a more reliable connection. So I appreciate y'all. Hit me up on Twitter. On that note, I'm wait, hold on. Next week, yeah, the first is Tuesday. So yeah, if I go live next week, it'll be late next week. Anyway, for right now, this has been another episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm your host, Jazz Monet, and I'm out.